Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here today. I'm absolutely delighted to be interviewing Sarah Walker for our executive series. She's the first person that we're interviewing as part of this series, and we are so delighted that she'll be joining us here today. She comes to us from Ribbon, where she is the VP of Engineering, and she has had quite a wonderful career journey finding her way into the PropTech space. So I'm very confident that you're going to enjoy hearing from her today. So thank you so much, Sarah, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So just as a start, I'd love to cover off a little bit about how you found your way into the industry. Can you talk a little bit about your career journey?
Yeah, sure. So I started the first half of my career in consulting. So that meant I was working on a number of different industries, a number of different technology projects. And it really set a foundation of a lot of my experiences that carried me forward. From there, I went into building products, and that's what I love doing, and really kind of found my home working on a number of different startups. And specifically, I was focused very much in the ad tech industry for a number of years. And that experience drew me to a company called White Ops, where I worked on some very mission driven technology in the ad tech space. And what brought me into PropTech was actually my passion for mission driven technology and the fact that Ribbon is this great combination of technology and mission. And the problem it's solving just happens to be in the real estate space. I'm also just passionate about real estate. I purchased my own home. I've purchased actually several homes and just saw all the different opportunities where innovation and technology need to come together. So it just feels like this really great space where I can have an impact.
Fantastic. Well, we're very glad that you found your way into PropTech. It's just such a wonderful industry full of a lot of creative people who are
Mhm.
really looking to make a change in the built world. So we do have a lot of people from our audience that aren't from a tech background. So if you don't mind, could you maybe just tell us real estate people what actually is a VP of engineering? What do you do? What are your responsibilities? And how does it maybe differ to other roles?
Sure. So my responsibility is really setting the technical strategy for the company, and with that, that's building out the engineering team, mentoring the engineers, mentoring engineering managers, really contribute to the overall product strategy of the company. So my focus is squarely in that product build out, but really specifically focus on technology innovation and applying technologies to solving the problems.
Fantastic. So then, just as an example, what might a day to day look like for you?
Um, it ranges quite rapidly. So, a lot of times in prop tech companies, engineers are a bulk of the people. So a lot of it is interviewing. It's always we're constantly hiring. A lot of it is also coaching and working with the engineering managers, solving technical problems. Something might not be scaling, and how could we solve that? Maybe it's a product feature that we don't know how to build and implement. Like, let's dig in and solve those problems. But then I'm also part of the executive leadership team. So then my role is also sitting in on tech, overall company strategy and helping shape the future of the company as well. So no 2 days are the same at all.
I suspected that it was a little bit of a trick question, but I do think that gives some insights. So, coming as an outsider into PropTech, what were some of your initial observations, and how long have you been with Ribbon?
So I joined Ribbon in October of last year. So I'm really coming into this as an outside perspective and a fresh perspective. I think what I've noticed is there's a lot of niche solutions. So there's a lot of solutions that are solving individual problems within prop tech. And where there's a lot of opportunity is how do we bring a lot of these technologies together to overall improve the overall real estate experience for everybody that's involved. There's so many actors and players, and the niche products have kind of delivered on those particular areas. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for really kind of pulling those things together to make it really easy for people to buy and sell homes.
Fantastic. So, this is probably a good time to actually transition to talking about Ribbon itself. Would you mind maybe giving a little bit of an overview about, who is Ribbon, what do they do, how long have they been around, but also about how you're talking about this ecosystem and how that piece fits into it all?
Sure. So Ribbon was founded 3 years ago, and the mission around Ribbon is how do we make homeownership achievable for everyone? And we have essentially we're building like a transactional gateway, if you will, of where buyers and sellers can come together. And specifically, our focus is on the agents. So how do buying agents and listing agents make sure that they're making the best offers and getting the best offers on their homes? And within that, we've given people transact financial products that essentially allow them then to enable home ownership in really interesting ways. So, for example, we have a buy before you sell product, right? So we come in as a all cash offer into the platform, gives you the space to be able to sell your home before you buy your next home. And there's a lot of families that can't do that. And so an institutional investor who has that capital can sweep in and scoop up that home. But we're giving that flexibility to families so that they don't have to worry about entering a contingency situation, but they have an all cash offer to be able to be competitive.
So coming in with a product like that, where you're allowing a family to buy before they sell, this sounds like revolutionary change of the model entirely. Um, for the founding team, how was it? How difficult was it to educate the market about being open to adoption of something that's radically different, or is it
Yeah.
not so radically different?
Yes. So we spent a lot of time in the North Carolina market is where we started, specifically in Charlotte. And our founders really just boots to the ground, talking to real estate agents, talking to families. They had also had personal experiences with challenges buying their home, and that those personal experiences really helped them create these financial products that they felt could really transform the way that people need to transact on homes. So it was a lot of, really just sitting and going with agents and seeing how, what were the challenges that families were facing and coming up with their financial background of coming up financial products that could solve those problems.
So what I'm hearing is that they really did a lot of, boots on the ground, working with the people that are in the know with the real estate agents and understanding their needs. And then are they from a technology background, financial
Yes.
services, the founders?
Yes, financial services and
Financial
technology.
services. Okay, fantastic. So just really coming in and understanding, what are the needs to be able to do something quite different, which sounds really fantastic. So for you coming into PropTech itself, what were some of the learnings that you had to do to understand the sector itself?
Yes. So the real estate transaction is quite complex, and I still feel like I'm learning every single day. So by no means do I feel like I'm an expert. But a lot of it's spending time with the business partners. We have people on the team that have been brokers in charge, large agencies. They know the space in and out. So really listening to them, and then also just doing a lot of reading and research and sort of understanding the industry and the domain to understand, where are there different competitors, how different people are trying to solve these various problems, and really learning from my team. So I have the fortune that they've been doing this. Some of them, since the beginning of Ribbon, so they've been a great source of education for me.
Was there anything that surprised you about getting into PropTech?
Um, It really there's so much digital transformation that could still happen in prop tech. I think, it's a very relationship-based space, right? Which is really important, and those relationships need to stay in place. But there's a lot of things that can be enabled through technology that could just make those processes where people could kind of focus on that high value relationship with customers, understanding their needs, matching them to the right home, matching a seller to the right offer, and not worry about paperwork and transactions and how to manage offer docs. And that's the area that we kind of are trying to focus on building technology for, so that agents can really do the high value work.
Fantastic. And I think people listening in will be happy to hear that the broker's not gone. It's just the messy work that's been taken away from them. And that's the stuff that can be automated, streamlined, cleaned up.
Yes, absolutely.
Fantastic. So if you could maybe just walk through, what would a typical user journey be like? Because I suppose what I'm hearing is that you're working predominantly with brokers that they're then bringing their customers to the platform. Is that how it all works?
Yes.
And what are the advantages of using Ribbon?
Sure. So So brokers will work with buyers and they might be in different situations where they need to come in with an all cash offer. So maybe they're already under contract and the deal is falling through. And we come in and we kind of save the day so that they're still able to close, but then they get 6 months to like work through that financing process. So usually a buying agent comes to us and says, I have a buyer that has this really strong need for ribbon. And then they come into the software and the tools and they use them to essentially put in that home, enter information about that buyer, give us the pre-approval letter so that we know that they're, a validated buyer in our system. And then we do some underwriting on our side, and then we actually submit that offer to the listing agent and provide tools for the listing agent to review the offer, compare the offer to other offers that they might have received, as well as do negotiations on that experience. We also just recently launched last week a mobile app so that people could even do this on the go. So we had an agent recently, he had 20 minutes to get his offer in before the timeline, and he was able to do it right in the palm of his hands with the mobile app. So that's another part of the user experience that we're hoping to really develop on this year.
Fantastic. So I've got so many questions, so I've got to just control myself and have one at a time. I suppose my first question is, in the scenario that you've described now, how much of the buying process is now automated and how much of it is manual and face-to-face? And having said that, I do understand that so much of the property buying process just in the industry is just so paper-based, paper contracts, paper submissions, et cetera, et cetera. And what do you see the future of a fully digital experience being?
Yes. So our vision from a fully digital experience is really everything from being able to craft a really good offer. So there's so many multiple offer situations. So how do buyers even know how to make the most competitive offer and give like all that the tools and analytics that need to make that decision? All the way through, closing, which is a very complicated, very, very paper-based solution. So how do we digitize as much of those docs, do as much of this in a real-time way with different parties within the platform being able to collaborate on those documents? We also have focused a lot on there's different docs and different steps along the way for every single market and every single state. So we spend a lot of time on innovating just how to make that streamlined so that the addendas that might be in one state are very different in another, and make sure that all those things are there, they're signed, they're packaged, somebody gets it quickly, they can make a decision quickly, and then hopefully close on their home quickly.
So you mentioned within all of that, you mentioned analytics and insights. What type of insights are you able to provide to the brokers that you're working with?
Sure. So as more and more offers run through our platform, we get more visibility into basically the market dynamics that are happening, right? How long is a home sitting on market before it gets an offer that's accepted, right? Different kind of pieces of data like that can help inform, how do you craft that really strong offer? We have buyers that they've come in and maybe they lost on that first home, but they've tried 3 more times for another home. So having kind of that historical data too about, how many offers does it take before you might get into the home that you want to? Again, just all of that kind of information just really helps agents figure out how to best, do this matchmaking process.
Fantastic, thank you. Um, this is probably more of a general question and not so much just about ribbon, but there is a lot of concern about data collection and privacy. How does that play into the home buying space, and what are the things that you're always thinking about in this regard?
Yes. So I think of the work we do, even though we're in the prop tech space. I mean, we also have a strong financial transaction that we're running through our platform. So we need to be as protective of people's data and privacy as a bank. I come from a cybersecurity background. I worked 3.5 years doing bot detection, so I'm constantly paranoid in a healthy way about all the things that could happen and all the types of breaches that could occur. So taking care of people's data and making sure that one, if we're using analytics, it's very anonymized, it's not attributable to any individual, but also all that personal identifiable information, the financial information, that we have really robust security practices about protecting that data.
Great, thank you. So, can I ask you, in terms of your vision now for the platform, as you mentioned before, you're quite new to the company, only joining late last year. So, what's your vision for the product? Where you want to take it in, in the next year? even taking it further into the next 5 or 10 years as technology changes? Where do you see things going?
Sure. I think one is just market expansion. So right now we're focused in 5 different markets. We're hoping to launch in many more markets. The other is really this mobile experience, really in the next year, figuring out that sweet spot of how to enable this in a mobile way. Another kind of core piece of this is, building that intelligence into the product so that people could really make the right decisions around buying and selling homes. And then really where we're going from a future standpoint is this, what we call internally, this home checkout experience. And I don't see that as, you go onto Amazon and you and you buy your, shampoo. This is a very big transaction, but how do we make it as smooth as that, taking you all the way through closing, right? So those are kind of key pieces for us. Also, building consumer-based experiences too, along the way, for how buyers and sellers could also get access to a lot of this information.
Fantastic. I love that vision, and especially that seamlessness of a transaction. I mean, just as we've identified previously, just the complexities and the different parties and the paperwork and the nuances of even a what you'd think would be a day-to-day residential transaction is just so cumbersome. And
Right.
if you can solve for that, there's going to be a lot of happy people. Um, Something that I did want to ask you about is, especially in the climate that we're having today, where we're sitting in the pandemic. 2020 last year was a real shake up for a lot of realtors, especially. Can you maybe talk about how your product responded to that environment?
Yes. So, at the height of the pandemic, it was really hard to predict what would happen to housing, right? And the real estate markets. And I think the biggest surprise for us, so we were trying to be very protective of our growth, right? So we slowed and pulled back on growth because we do carry some homes on inventory, and we needed to be careful and responsible about how much we were taking on in case we couldn't because in case buyers couldn't buy those homes and then we couldn't sell them back on the market. The exact opposite happened of explosive growth in the real estate market, of people leaving cities. I'm based in New York. A lot of people have migrated outside of New York City into other metro areas, and these metro areas are now in these highly competitive situations. So we've had to really react and pivot very quickly, given these dynamics, because it was really not what we saw coming. Because usually if you think of a recession, you think that that's actually going to hit the real estate market. And it has in certain places, but the places that are hot are super hot.
So, do you think that the pandemic and the need to digitize helped accelerate the willingness of of agents and of buyers to try a new model?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, think about all the people that the technology that's kind of popped up around just like virtual showings and seeing homes, and that's just accelerated in the last few months. People aren't comfortable with strangers coming in their homes, and people aren't comfortable having like those interactions, with their buyer. It's very, very different in today's world. So I think it's accelerated the need for technology to solve a lot of these problems, and also for the better, because a lot of everybody's busy, right? So how do you just make it so simple so that all these families, you still have your job that you're doing every day, you have a family you're taking care of, right? And you don't want buying a home to become another full-time job on top of that.
Absolutely. Just staying on the theme of the pandemic and everything going remote, you mentioned that a large part of what you do as VP of engineering is managing your team.
Right.
You mentioned that some of your team is now located across the country, potentially even across the world. How have you, as a manager, and especially new in the role, coming in during the height of the pandemic, how have you been able to motivate your team, have a sense of cohesion? What are some of the tips that you might have for other managers?
Yep. It's definitely hard. And I think actually the biggest thing is to recognize that it's different and hard, that you can't just replicate the same kinds of meetings and stand ups and sort of everyday processes we do as engineers, in the same way, just over Zoom. So, for example, we've created a lot more connection points so that people could kind of get together in more ad hoc fashions. One way that I try to keep it fresh is that I'll just Slack somebody in the middle of the day and I'll send them a Zoom link and say, hey, let's join up, just as if I was walking over to their desk. Instead of having it so prescribed that your day is, at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock on Zoom, right? So we've really been intentional of just trying to kind of mix that model a lot more. And also, I've just given a lot of coaching to people about interpersonal dynamics are very different when you're not face to face. And so the way you interpret something is going to have to be a little bit different. You're going to have to put yourself in a different mindset, be a little bit more empathetic, because you don't have that, other social engagement that you get in an office.
I think that's a great point, and I think a lot of it is really around empathy. And I've definitely said it to my sister when she's been frustrated about some people that she's been dealing with in the US. I'm like, listen, you don't know what's going on at home. You don't know how many kids are running around. If
Yes.
you don't know what's going on in somebody's circumstance, but we will have to show up, put on a smile, sometimes get out of our pajamas, depending on whether there's Zoom calls or not. But it is, I think, a lot about being empathetic to the climate and helping people to be motivated and be their best selves when they are working in an isolated situation, and knowing that the team is there to support them, and to have strong managers that understand their circumstances is very important. So I appreciate that approach. So can I ask you, so just generally for you personally, outside of this challenging time at the moment, what are some other times in your career that you have had some challenging times, and how have you managed to overcome it?
Yes. Change is always hard for everybody, right? When you come into an organization, especially as a new leader, there's like a lot of change that tends to happen, right? There's a way of a team is working. You have your own fresh perspective. You have your fresh eyes. You're able to listen to feedback, and from that feedback, you might want to make organizational shifts or, introduce new types of functions into the group, et cetera. So I think the most challenging times I've had is just managing teams through change. And I've learned a lot of skills along the way of how to bring people along through change, have all the active conversations, how important communication is when you're going through change. So that's been probably the hardest thing for me, especially depending on the size of the group that's going through that change.
With the movement to work from home and work remote, do you think this is something that's here to stay, or do you think it's a blip on the radar?
I think people are starting to crave going back to offices in some ways because they miss some of the human interaction. But that doesn't mean I think that we're going to have the same model we've had in the past. So I do think that people are going to use offices and office space in a very different way, where it's, we've been talking about how is it not where you're just tied to your desk, from 9 to 5, but you're going there because you're going there to collaborate, right? I think we all have found that being home, we could be more productive in a lot of interesting ways without commutes. With also being able to just kind of close the door if you're lucky to in your home, where if you're an open office plan, you're very distracted by everything else going on, especially for engineers who really need that focus time to code. So I think the future of work is going to be very different, but I do think it's a hybrid. I don't think it's going to be 100% remote, and I don't think it's going to be 100% at people's desks. But I'm hoping people use the time they're in person just more on collaboration versus, feeling like it's an obligation.
Great. So just moving outside of real estate, but just kind of staying in where we've been in the past 12 months, what are some of the trends that you've seen outside of the real estate industry, but in perhaps the broader technology industry that we can learn from?
Yes. I think so because we all went digital so quickly, there's been so much on like collaboration tools and work productivity tools. So that's been a big trend that I've seen of, just a lot of different companies. Either they were already existing and they're adding a lot of features that didn't exist before, or they're coming up with really creative solutions for things that I've always had remote and distributed teams, and some of these problems have always been there. And it's really nice now people care to put effort into it because there's more people that need it. I think also, so yeah, so definitely team collaboration and those kind of tools. Other things are, I think with so much transacting online, I do think there's been a lot of innovation on rethinking just brick and mortar shopping and stores and stuff like that. Amazon's clearly dominated in this space, but I think it's really given a lot of other kind of focus on how do you make, so like Drizzly is a service that brings a cocktail to your home, right? Things like that that never would have thought of that you needed. But those are pretty cool innovations that we're starting to see of like kind of that service-based, bring a human element to where you are, even though you're disconnected.
Yeah, I love that. All about that that human interaction. Actually, I think Uber was looking at acquiring Drizzly as part of
Oh,
their offering. So now you can have your cocktail Ubered over to you,
right.
which is great. Uh, so, just generally speaking, what excites you about technology in the prop tech space, and what do you think the future looks like for the broader industry? Again, coming in as an outsider that's quite new to the space, what
Right.
excites you?
Um, I think because this is a space that really there's so much opportunity for technology because you can apply a lot of things that have applied in other industries into the prop tech space. And while there's the Airbnbs and certain like kind of key dominant players in different areas, I think there's a lot of opportunity to like continue to build off of that and solve all these other kind of problems. So for example, things like digital financial profiles of people I've been thinking about, right? If you're applying for mortgages, you're shopping around, you're going to all these different places, you have a financial profile that you need to share over and over again. How do we create a digital financial profile so that you just have a profile of yourself? That gives all of your financial information. I also I have an investment property that I rent out, and I feel that all of the prop tech space that's kind of focused on really like people finding a home that they could rent for a period of time, right? But there's not a lot of great technology and tooling for homeowners. It's all geared around the end consumer and not as much about the homeowners. So I have a million ideas in that space too of, just ways that like where you don't need a property manager to do a lot of that work, but like so much could be just streamlined and simplified. And I could see like machine learning AI to like kind of help you manage that whole experience, so that you're not doing a second job to be able to manage a home that you might be putting out on an Airbnb or a Verbo.
I love it. I love the idea. And I suppose that's the thing, to look at it through different users of a product as well. In real estate, we often look at the different asset classes and we
Right.
understand our vertical and we stay in our lane. But to
Right.
kind of go outside of that, there's huge opportunities. So just in concluding, I'd like to ask you, if there were three technologies that you'd like to see invented that you believe would revolutionize the prop tech industry, what would they be? Whether it's something that just performs one little task or something that's just completely groundbreaking, for example, makes every building carbon neutral.
um, that's a great question. I so one, I'm really kind of bullish on like kind of that digital financial profile. I do think that really unlocks a lot. I think there's a lot that could be done, really with AR, VR, and so augmented reality to really also enhance experiences in the prop tech space. And we're only kind of scratching the surface of some of these virtual 3D tours and stuff like that. But imagine a different world. So I'd love to see more of that innovation happen. Um, I think the last one I would suggest is, um, yeah, how do we in prop tech also figure out how to impact the environment, and are there technologies that can happen there? Just I do find a lot of interesting technologies in just like the home management, right? And how you're using efficiencies in your home. There's so much more that I think could get automated. We have smart appliances and they're giving us data, and a lot of, again, that's not stitched together. Like you have really cool smart fridges out there, but you just don't necessarily have kind of an orchestrated look into like how you're doing that across the board. So I think there's a lot of cool tech that could be built.
Fantastic. I think again here I'm hearing a lot about, especially in your final comment, just about the need to have integration across these different types of technologies. And in what you described about ribbon, that certainly is something that happens.
Yeah.
I'd love to. I agree. We have the smartest TVs, the smartest fridges, the smartest toasters, the smartest everything. But at the end of the day, almost everybody's home is no different today than it was 15 years ago or pre-internet. It hasn't really changed, and there's huge opportunities. I like to say, I've worked in the real estate development space, and I used to say to my clients, if you can buy something at Best Buy, we really should be putting it into our projects. And that's something I'd love to see more for the industry, is just really understanding that the world has changed. We're fully digital. The internet's changed everything. Having phone apps, voice commands as well is just changing everything. And I, for one, am super excited to see where everything goes. And I'm also super excited by people such as yourself coming in from outside of the industry, bringing fresh insights and fresh expertise. So we are out of time. This has been absolutely wonderful. Before we sign out, is there anything final that you'd like to add that we haven't had a chance to touch on?
No, I really enjoyed our conversation, and thank you so much for having me.